When you were a little kid growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up? I mean, I'm sure it wasn't an appraiser. If you were like me, you didn't know what an appraiser was.
No.
I wanted to be, a little later in life, I wanted to be a police officer. And then I thought, maybe an attorney. But when I was a little bitty, I wanted to be a cowboy. I mean, I think a lot of us little guys. I've got my cowboy shirt on today. I'll tell you though, my brother and I were playing cowboys one day, and I went over into the saloon to get us a refreshment, right? And I'm carrying these bottles of beer or bourbon. I don't know what it was, but I was carrying several. I guess we were thirsty, and I tripped and I fell down. I tripped on my own feet. I wasn't going to include that part, but I fell down and I actually landed on the bottles, and I'm like, ouch. And I stood up, and my brother said, don't move, just look straight ahead. And I had pajamas on, and he's pulling down my pajama bottoms, and he stopped and said, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. He said, let me go get Mom. Whatever you do, don't look. I'll be right back. And he took off. Of course, the first thing I did was look. Oh my God, that looks bad. I had a big cut right on my rear end, and part of me was hanging out of that hole in my rear end. And I didn't panic. I pulled the rest of my pajama bottoms down, and I had another cut in my leg. And my mom gets up there, and she's like, oh my God, and let's go to the hospital. And I'm like, well, I kind of need to put some pants on. So I couldn't get pants on where I was cut. So she brought me a big towel, and I held a towel there and got some shorts about halfway up. And I remember walking in. I thought I was like John Wayne, walking in limping, got shot. And the doctor was sewing me up. And he started laughing. And I said, Doc, I don't think this is very funny. I'm glad you're laughing. What's so funny? And he said, well, I just thought about that. This is just kind of funny. You got glass in your ass, right?
In your derriere.
Yeah, I didn't think it was funny. When we come back, you're going to meet a real cowboy, and maybe he can cowboy up me here in the near future, because obviously I'm not too good at either carrying beer or bourbon or being a cowboy. But in just a moment, you're going to meet a real cowboy. He's an appraiser too, and we're going to have him on. So don't go anywhere. Come on back and join me and my special guest. Hi, this is Brian Reynolds. You're listening to the Appraisal Update Podcast, brought to you as always by the great folks over at Appraiser eLearning. You need some education? Come on over to appraiserelearning.com and check us out. I'd like to thank our sponsor, LIA Administrators and Insurance Services, for all their support of the Appraisal Update Podcast. Everything they do, they attend the conferences, which we'll talk about in just a little bit because my guest is going to be at one of them coming up. And so thank you, LIA, for your continued support. All right, without further delay, I'm super happy and honored to have a special guest today. He is a cowboy. He is an appraiser, the one, the only, Mr. Brad Bassi. Welcome, Brad. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Brian. It's truly an honor to be here with you. And I can't follow directions because, heck, I tried chiming in the middle of the thing I wasn't supposed to be talking about.
It's fine. Like the doctor, I got a laugh out of you, too. I didn't mean to get a laugh out of the doctor. I was laying there in pain, for crying out loud. But yeah, that's one of my cowboy stories. I've been cut a lot. I used to think I'd never had a broken bone, but I think I've had plenty. I just didn't know about it. And I had a boxer fracture not long ago. But I've been cut a lot. I think it happened when I was a baby. Of course, I don't know that, but I have a scar on the bottom of my chin. And apparently I was on the potty chair and busted my chin open. And they took me and got it all stitched up. Well, I'd slobber over it. And then what happened? I busted it open again. And they said, forget it. We're not fixing him again. So
I'm starting to see a trend here already, and this is just the early part of this.
I'll show you the one on my chin sometime. I'm not showing you the one on my butt. Okay.
No, I don't want to see it. You can show it to whoever you want, but I'm not doing the Brokeback Mountain thing.
It just looks like a big 7 backwards, right? So Brad, tell everybody a little bit about Mr. Brad Bassi.
Well, y'all that are old enough, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. And my wife always gets nervous when she sees a microphone anywhere near me because she thinks that's probably going to be a 4-hour conversation. I was born in the state of Missouri, and yes, I know it does have an I at the end of it. But for those of us that are somewhat apparently illiterate, I've always called it Missouri, and that's where I was born. We were a family. The family farm was about a 160-acre quarter section land, about 160 acres, south of Kansas City, a couple hours. And then I didn't go well there, so I was thrown out of that small town of 106 and moved over to another small town in Kansas, and I lived there until I was in high school. And I was around ranching. The story goes as when I was a little kid, apparently I wandered. You were asking about, being a cowboy. Apparently, at the ripe old age of about 4 or 5, I guess, apparently I wandered out of our property where our ranch house was at and across the road, and I managed to find a way to climb underneath a fence and walk through a herd of horses. Mm. And there was about, as the story goes, because I don't remember any of it, but as the story goes, I was apparently about 40 or 50 horses, and there were a couple of alpha mare ladies running around in that herd, and there were a couple of stallions in that herd. And one of the wranglers from the ranch that had all the horses saw this little tiny half-pint kid with flaming red hair walking among the horses. He managed to maneuver his horse around and pick me up by the nape of my neck and threw me up on the back of his horse, like going, "What are you doing? You're going to get killed." So according to my dad, whom I just visited in Texas, he lives up north of Dallas, about 45 minutes. And my dad is 103 years old, and unfortunately, he's suffering for a little bit of the dementia thing. But my dad, it's part of the circle of life. But he had a good 100-year run. The last 2.5 years haven't been so much fun. But we were sitting in the den, and the other night, before we left, he proceeded to tell a couple of the family members there that, Brad always wanted to be a cowboy when he was a little kid. And I looked at him and I went, "Dad, thanks."
I tried.
As he looked at me as I'm heading out the door wearing my Stetson.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. So talk to us a little bit. How did you go from, trying to, rope horses at 3 years old, 4 years old to becoming an appraiser? How did that happen?
Well, I can tell you this much. There was definitely not a direct route. I graduated out of, I had a whole bunch of different things, but I eventually got out of college, and I went and got my graduate degree up in Northern Arizona University up in Flagstaff. And from there, I got hired by a defense contracting company, and that was back in 1979, so that will date me somewhat. And from there, I spent 13 years in corporate life. I got released. Shall we say I had a difference of opinion of the chairman of the board. And so I was released, and I was out in Texas visiting the guy that was best man at my wedding. And his younger brother was an appraiser. He happened to be an SRA. And we were out playing golf, and he said, "Hey, what are you going to do now that you're not in corporate? Are you going to go back into it?" And I said, "Nope." Said, "I know what I'm not going to do, and I'm not going back into corporate life." And he goes, "Well, have you thought about, why don't you be an appraiser?" And I went, "What the hell is that?" I didn't have a clue what an appraiser was.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I had no idea. So he said, "Look, I got a couple of jobs I got to go out and on tomorrow." And he said, "Why don't you meet me?" And I said, "Okay." I didn't know what it was. I thought I'd find out what was going on. So, of course, I held the smart end of the tape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
It's really called the dumb end, by the way.
well, yeah, thanks. I am familiar with that.
Okay.
As I was notified of that on several occasions with him. But I got to see what he was doing, and I was kind of intrigued by it. And because of my corporate background and some of the things I'd done, I said, hey, he had a business partner, and I said, any chance you guys would open up your books and I can just kind of take a look, see what your gross revenues were, what your income, is, and kind of your net costs and that kind of stuff. And he goes, yeah, let me talk to my partner. We'll find out. So next day, his partner said, sure, I don't have a problem with it. Where are you out of? And I said, well, I'm living in Southern California. And he said, well, I don't care then. So he opened up the books and I got to see what their revenue stream was. I got to see what their cash, what their costs were and what was going on. And I thought, kind of watched what he did and, wandered around with him. I ended up calling my wife and said, hey, I'm going to stay here another week because I want to watch what his younger brother's doing, my best man's younger brother was doing. And she said, sure. And so she was getting ready to leave town again. She didn't really care. And she had dogs protected and everybody else was watching the rest of the animals. So I said, okay. And so I spent another week with him and I'm kind of like going, I might be able to do this for a couple of years until I figure out what I'm going to grow up to be. Well, right. That was 32 years ago, and apparently I haven't figured it out yet because I'm still doing it.
Still there. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it is that you're doing. Are you doing mortgage work? Are you doing litigation work? Are you doing ranches? What do you do with your appraiser hat on?
Well, with the appraiser hat on, starting in about 2005, a time frame right around there, 04, 05, I realized that something weird was going on because Countrywide was my second largest client. Second largest client. And they accidentally sent me a form on the fax machine and I'm looking at it and it turns out to be some document that's showing 125% financing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at that going, what?
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So I called and talked to the branch office and I said, what is this? And they go, oh, it's 125% finance. This greatest thing since sliced bread and warm butter. And I went, no, not with my appraisal. It's not.
Yeah.
And I realized right then and there that something was going on in the industry and I really needed to do something different because I was doing 100% mortgage work.
Okay. So you're an appraiser. You were an appraiser focusing solely on refinance purchases, maybe a foreclosure
Correct.
or something like that. But it was all your entire business model was to work in the mortgage related field for appraising.
Correct. And the other reason I did that was because my mentor, he had an exclusive agreement with a small bank up in West LA that was very exclusive. And that's how I cut my teeth. I was commuting back from where I live in Southwest Riverside County up to LA. And I'd spend 3 or 4 days, sometimes 5 days up there with him when I got my mentoring ship and got going. And I was doing work in Beverly Hills, Beverly Glen, Malibu, Brentwood, Palisades, you name it, was all the high-end stuff. My first house I ever did with him was a 20,000 square foot mansion.
Whoa.
Yeah, I climbed out of his Mercedes-Benz because he was putting on the show, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I climbed out of his Mercedes-Benz in front of this house in Beverly Hills, and I said, you want me to measure what? And he goes, Brad, measuring this house is not a problem. It's a box.
Yeah, just a big box.
Built in it was a big box.
It's a really big
box. It was built in the 1930s, I think.
Yeah.
But he said, your problem is going to be, you're going to be here for at least 2 days, maybe 3. And I'm like, what? He said, this house has been upgraded to the hilt. And he said, the interior designer is going to be meeting you this afternoon, and you're going to take, what was the word he used? Copious notes.
Nice.
I had to look that word up to figure out what that meant.
I'll look it up when we're done.
Yeah.
So in 2005, you got an order. You saw the 125% LTV. And for those of my listeners that maybe are newer and weren't around in 2005, they got really creative. And what Brad's talking about is we kind of went from a collateral-based lending society, I guess, to a credit-based lending society. So if you had sterling credit, they would say, well, we know your home is only worth $100,000. but because you have great credit, we will give you $125,000. And the consumers were like, great, I'll buy a car, or I'll go to Disney World. This is the best thing ever. Until later they get in a jam and they need to sell their house and they can't because they owe more on it than what it's worth. Well, you'll go refinance. No, you won't, because you owe more on it than it's worth. And then the 125%, LTV loans went away. And during that time also, Brad, you had what we call the liar loans, no money down. Just tell me, appraisers are self-employed, most appraisers. So appraiser, just tell me how much money you make and we'll write that down and we'll give you a loan based on whatever you tell us. And we're not going to check. That was crazy.
I thought $500,000 would work for me.
Well, here's the thing. Don't answer this. Brad, if you make $500,000, we can't make the loan. But if you make $600,000, we can make the loan and close on Friday and nobody's going to check. How much you make?
600.
Yeah, great. I'll see you at the closing table. Guys, as silly as our conversation we're having, Brad and I, right now, seems, that's what was happening. And if you want, I've talked about this a lot. There's a movie out called The Big Short. If you haven't seen that, rent that. It's a cute little story that explains how all this happened. But you're telling me you kind of saw the writing on the wall early on. You kind of thought this can't last very long. And so what did you do, Brad?
I started looking for alternatives, and part of it was starting to figure out what else could I use my appraisal services for. And the first thing that came up, and it was by happenstance, it was an attorney called and said, hey, these people had your business card and they're going through a family law, they're going through a divorce, and can you do an appraisal for us? And I said, sure. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I said, sure, I can do this.
Right. And
so that was my first introduction to it. And I had called my mentor on the phone and I said, hey, this is what's coming down the pike for me. And I'd left his business and I was out on my own at this point. And he and I'd remained friends for quite a few years after that. And then he said, just be careful a couple of things. He said, I've done some a little bit before, and here's a couple of questions to ask. And I said, okay. So I did. And that was kind of the beginning of it, was my first divorce case. And fortunately, that one didn't go to court, but a few thereafter did. And so I kind of got my feet wet, shall we say, in an interesting manner, because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I didn't have anybody to really give me any coaching on it. But that's how I got started. And then from there, I got into estate work because my dad had been a trustee. My dad was an income tax accountant after we moved out of the country, moved into the suburbs. My dad was an income tax accountant, and he was a pretty smart fella, and he got into trusts and stuff. And he was a trustee for probably 40 or 50 trusts. And I kept hearing all this information about trusts and all the different things that were going on with that. And so I started kind of nosing around with trust, a little bit of trust work. And then, of course, the Great Recession hit in '08. For those of you that aren't old enough to remember, go back and take a look at September and see Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, and then you can see what happened after that. Yeah. And from there, I started changing my model. And because a lot of appraisers were struggling, a lot of them were trying to figure out what to do with the REO business. It didn't come with a spoon. It came with a fire hose. Mm-hmm. And most of us were a lot of appraisers were trying to learn on the job with that. And I could just see where it was going, because nobody wanted to pay an appraiser to go, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? Nobody wanted to pay an appraiser for, doing an REO research job and going out and figuring out what was going on with the house and how much damage was done after the people walked out. And, so I just said, I just don't see this being where I want to go for the rest of my life. Plus, I could see what was going on. Fees were getting to be kind of a monk. And then we hit 2010, and then the HVCC came out, and then that got sunsetted, and then Dodd-Frank came through, and then I'm like going, appraisal management company, one more layer? I don't think this is going to work very well. Now, I'm not speaking ill of AMCs. I'm just saying it just wasn't in my business model.
Sure.
And so that was really the beginning, 2010.
So Brad talks about Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank was actually called the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. That's the official name. Dodd-Frank's a lot easier, short. And yeah, it kind of kept the HVCC going because, as you said, that was sunsetting. It was going away, and then this federal piece of legislation kind of kept it going, and that was frustrating for a lot of us. Don't go anywhere, Brad. I gotta give a special shout out, but I'm not done with you yet, so don't go anywhere. You know, LIA, I can't say enough good things about LIA. They have supported me for a while now. They're supporting the podcast, the webinar that we have. They come to the conferences, and for over 45 years, they've been offering E&O insurance to valuation professionals just like you and just like me. They apply superior customer service, exceptional liability education, and simply unparalleled claim defense to serve well over 10,000 appraisers and professionals across the country. They provide commercial bond, general liability, cyber liability, and so much, much more. Visit liability.com today to learn more about how they can help protect you as well as your business. Okay, so there are a lot of appraisers listening or watching, and maybe, Brad, they say, good for you, Brad, but I'm not the kind of person that wants to go sit in a courtroom and be, cross-examined. What do you say to them if we talk about ways of using your experience and expertise as an appraiser, maybe creating a specialty? What do you say to that appraiser right now listening that's saying litigation work's not for me?
Um, well, a couple of thoughts on that. The first thought is that when you became an appraiser, you probably weren't aware of all the things you were going to get into, but you managed to step outside the box and push yourself a little bit. So I always tell everybody, don't get into panic mode over the litigation type situation. But if that really isn't something where you want to go, then one of the things I always kind of throw out to people and recommend is what's your niche? And, what do you really like doing? What's in your particular area that you can excel at? Is it, are you in an urban area where there's a lot of high rises and you can specialize on downtown condominiums? And you've got all the data and what the corner condo with the big city light views is worth, and through paired sales and some other things, how to separate out those that don't have the same kind of view and specialize in something. Downtown condos or 2 to 4 units. Maybe you're in an area where there's just an enormous amount of 2 to 4 dwelling units. Get that your niche. Know your market. Know the real estate brokers and agents that deal in that market, and go meet them. Whoever's name's popping up a lot, go introduce yourself to them. Go find out where they hang out. Go buy them a cup of coffee. If you're kind of in an area where I'm at and you've got, some areas that people call it rural, it's more like semi-rural. Because if you can get to a grocery store in less than 20 minutes, it's not rural to me. But, semi-rural areas, if you got some of that, then, get your car dirty, get your truck dirty, go out and drive those dirt roads, find out what's going on out there, meet the brokers out in those areas. I've got an area out to the east of me that I know all the brokers out there, and whenever there's something going on out in their neck of the woods, they give me a phone call or they tell their client to call me because they know that I know that area. I've specialized in it, and I do residential land out there. And if you've got some areas where there's still land available that you can appraise, then go do it. Find a niche, whatever it might be. Maybe right now it's not a lot of proposed construction going on, but now's the time to really get your foot back in that door and get a good understanding of proposed construction if that's something that trips your fancy. But find a niche, and I think if you can do that, that'll be beneficial for your business.
I want to put up on the screen a minute your website if I can. Okay, so this is tell everybody a little bit about your website and where we find it. No, I don't want dictation on here. Oh my gosh, I got stuff popping up. But right here you say providing quality appraisals for custom homes, horse ranches, residential vacant land, and tract and condos. So right on your very first page here, Brad, you're kind of saying what your specialty is, right? Boom, as soon as we get on the first page.
It is, and I'm right now. I'm 100% I periodically, I'm on the VA panel, but I haven't done any work because of some medical stuff and some other things that were going on. But I've got one regional bank that I do some land for, and mostly land. That's about all I do with them. And they do proposed construction too, but there hasn't been any of that. So that's realistically the only thing that I do. Everything else is private party. And right now on my desk, 100% of my work is private party. And this is not, I don't want anybody to take this wrong, but I'm booking clients out into the third week of January.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
How often when you have a private party and they get the appraisal report in that you've delivered to them, I'm just curious, how often do you get a revision request? Just curious.
I've had one. I had one revision request because the property owner, it was for an estate deal, and they called on the phone. It was a horse ranch, and they called on the phone, and they ran through some things, and I had made a couple mistakes. I found there was a couple of typos and a couple of things they needed clarification on, and I said no problem.
Sure.
And because I charged a fee that was according to the fact that all the time I spent talking to them on the phone in the beginning, all the time I spent with the project, and then time afterwards. And so I was happy to respond to their questions, make a correction, but that doesn't happen very often. You know, I don't know. I'm certainly not God's gift to the appraisal world, but you know, I've got time allocated that if somebody's found something they want to talk to me about it, let's have a conversation.
You're charging for your time. So I've said for a long time that we as practitioners, we really charge for two things. We charge for our knowledge and we charge for our time. And it's amazing to me that so many valuers, in some countries we're called valuers, people that specialize in developing opinions of values very often, Brad, don't see their own value. I mean, what you have to offer as an appraiser is extremely valuable. So, hey, we've got a little bit of time left, but so much I want to cram in with you. You've got a class. You're working on a class. I think we're gonna have it at AEL, right? I know it's not quite ready, but you're in the final steps. Tell my audience a little bit about your class, what it is, and when can we expect it?
Well, I tell you, the appraiser eLearning people have been fantastic, and Bryan, I really appreciate y'all even considering dealing with some beat up old broken down cowboy and letting him get on and kind of do some stuff. But I'm going to be talking about the title of the class is called Expanding Your Book of Business and Increasing Your Average Fee. And I'm going to go through some steps on the things that I do. There will be handouts. There will be takeaways. There will be some short quizzes to make sure that people are semi paying attention. That's not part of your grade. Don't anybody panic. Little pop quizzes, if you will. But we're going to get into the type of work that I do and how I go about doing it. And it's really about, and I know people have heard this before, and I don't want to be a broken record, but those of us that have been in this business for longer than 5 weeks, we have got to change our mindset because we have been beaten up and dumbed down into, I've got a couple of words, but I won't use them because it'll be aired in public. But we have just been browbeat into oblivion, and we really have to change our mindset in how we look at things. And that goes back to charging for what your knowledge is and for your time. And that's part of what the discussion is understanding what our business is. What is it that you do? What is it that you're charging? What's your average cost for appraisal? What's your average fee for appraisal? Are you better off working at McDonald's? Or are you actually going to charge for what you're worth? And I understand the AMC world, and I got it. I still see that stuff that comes across my desk, and I know what everybody's up against. But it's time to take some little steps and break out of that area and start to do some things differently. And I know there are appraisers out there doing it. And what I'm hoping to do is be able to give them some thoughts about some things, also understand what's really important. And that is that the whole world changes. You don't have a pre-printed form anymore that guides you on where you need to go. You got to take control over that. And I know this is going to come as a really shock, but you get to write the scope of work.
I like it. I like it. Hey, so just real quick, I'm trying to cram in some final thoughts here.
Sure.
You're gonna be at the Axe conference. I talked about cowboying up, and you were twirling that thing around at the last one, and I didn't get an opportunity to get out there and do that. So tell me what I'm about to write this down because I want to know about it, and I should know about it, but I don't. All I know is my buddy Wade told me the other day, yeah, Teresa wants me to bring a bunch of ropes. So I grabbed 15 or 20 old lassos or whatever. What in the heck is he talking about, and what is going to be happening with you at the conference?
Well, Wade got suckered into this because I'm coming from Southern California. And yes, that's where I do reside. And yes, I am kind of an enigma out here. But Wade's going to be kind enough to bring up 3 roping dummies. And as I like to say, I'll be the 4th dummy that will be there. But these are actually hard plastic dummies that we'll be roping. And we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna try and set this thing up so we can do it as a fundraiser. And people will kick some money in. And this is going to go to Mr. Harrison's
The scholarship.
Fund. That's the scholarship fund. Well, I don't know. I believe that's where the money's going to go, but we're trying to do this for fundraising to help appraisers and to help education and that kind of thing. Mr. Harrison was huge. I truly love that man. He was an amazing individual and a great loss when he passed. But I thought, this was kind of a crazy way, and I'm going to put out a little note. There's a young lady running around out there by the name of Pam Teal. And Pam likes to walk over to people and kind of flutter her eyes and be real sweet and give you that, Southern Texas accent and just the nicest person on the face of the earth. And that's how I got roped in to coming back to Axe in San Antonio because she heard about the roping thing that I was doing down at the end of the hallway, trying to rope a chair and show Ben Maxwell and a few other people how to play that, how to have some fun with it. And that morphed into this craziness.
Really? Isn't that cool though? Isn't that interesting how some little, which I'm sure Ben was horrible at it. I don't know. Was he?
Actually, he shocked me.
Oh,
he was caught on. No, I'm telling you, he caught on pretty quick. Bud.
I don't want to hear it. So maybe Ben and I'll have a little competition here. I need a warm up or two. But isn't that cool how you were just playing around with Ben and Pam saw that as a fun type of event that we could offer to everyone and maybe make a little money to help others, hand in hand with that. I mean, I'm glad Pam did that, and thank you for volunteering to do that. And thank you, Wade, if you're listening, Wade. And Wade just, I bought a Jeep, Brad. I've always wanted a Jeep, and he's been on the hunt for me. The last 2 vehicles I bought, I didn't even drive it. This Jeep I haven't even seen in person yet. I just trust him. He bought it. Now he's taking it over and he's putting bells and whistles, and I'll be able to light up a small city with it. But yeah, the last truck I bought, I went in and the guy said, "Let me get the keys." I said, "No, son, I'm not here to buy. I'm not here to drive a truck. I'm here to buy a truck." I bought that thing and I got in it and started it up, and I didn't know how to put it in drive. It didn't have any of the mechanisms I'm used to. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you at Axe, and I think that'll be a lot of fun. Brad,
that's on April what?
Yeah,
it starts. I think I'm getting out there April 4th, and it goes that 7th through the 9th or 5th through the 8th or something.
See, you're asking me hard questions, so I'm just going
to... Well, I'm trying to remember. I can't look at my phone right now. So
I'm going to just let folks see how they can find it. If you jump over to appraisereLearning.com, and you go to live events, and then you come down to the Axe Conference. It's April 5th through the 8th in San Antonio, and there's a whole page on it, so you can get lots of information. There's a lot of events going on. There's some pre-conference education, and here's the schedule right here that you can click on and get all the details on the Axe Conference coming up in San Antonio in April. So we hope to see you guys there. Please come up and grab Brad and say hi to him, say hi to me, and the entire Appraiser eLearning team will be there. So we hope to see you guys there. So what's next for you? You're going to be at the Axe Conference. You said you've got work coming out your ears right now, it sounds like.
Well, it's not that it's coming out my ears. It's that I don't have 3-day turnarounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my proposals, the written proposals that I send out to people, lay out what's going on, what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do. And it also gives a guide to what's happening. And so I've got consistent level of work. And if it does slow down, then I work more on some other things that I need to work on, i.e. my roping and or this class that we're going to go probably around the end of the first quarter, I guess, is something that we're kind of shooting for.
Perfect.
And maybe early April, or maybe something comes out right after the ACT conference. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. Want to make sure it's done correctly and that the people are going to get their money's worth, and they're going to have some takeaways so that they've got something, not just a screenshot, but they're going to have some hard data to play around with, take with them.
Brad, isn't it refreshing that when you have a client call you and they want you, right? I did a big litigation case recently, and it's not over, so I can't really talk about it in detail, but it was in Nashville, and I testified, and I probably got to testify again in April or May for that one. And I thought after the fact, they never asked me what my fee was. That's a good client. That's a really good client. And I sent them a bill, and they paid me. And I didn't take advantage of that. I charged them what I would have charged them, even if they had asked.
Yeah.
I've got a call with an attorney later on this afternoon, and maybe I'll do work for her. Maybe I won't, but they're under the gun. They want something a little quicker. I don't know if we'll be able to meet it, but it's on a couple of farms. I've got a one case right now that we talked about in November, and I said, you're probably looking at January sometime before I can get you the number. That's not even the written report. That's just the number. And so isn't it refreshing that folks, when they really want to know what that property's worth and they value as a valuation professional, it's really refreshing to work for clients like that, isn't it?
It is. And that's the website that you just put up there. One of the good things about that for those people that are really thinking about branching and moving some different directions, we'll talk a little. I'm not a website expert or designer in any way, shape, or form, but we'll talk about that a little bit in the class as well. But that website of mine is huge, and it helps people get to know me before they actually pick up the phone and call me. And they feel pretty comfortable about it. And
I like that.
I get a hard time about the cowboy hat, especially out here in Southern California, but it's actually my brand. And it's my niche, it's my brand. And people know me. Sometimes they don't know my name, but they go, I've had real estate agents go, hey, look for a guy on the website, a guy wearing a cowboy hat, and because he's taught a couple of our classes in the MLS board, and I really like him, and he's straight shooter. And a lot of people call me on the phone, and I'll ask them, I say, who gave me the referral to me? And they go, well, it was some agent, and they told me to look for a guy with a cowboy hat. And I'm like,
I love
okay.
it. Well, it's working. Right. It's working.
Yeah.
Hey, Brad, if somebody wants to reach out to you, number one, give them the name of the website. I flashed it up there, but tell them how to get to the website, and also maybe an email address if someone wants to reach out to you directly.
Well, let me start with the email address. That's pretty simple. And for those that know me, they'll laugh and kind of put their head down because I'm kind of a simple guy. So it's my first and last name run together. So it's Brad Bassi, B as in Bravo, ASSI, at yahoo.com. There's no periods or spaces, so just run my whole name together. So that's Brad Bassi at yahoo.com. And then my website is World Wide Web, of course, and it's strawhatent.com.
Strawhatent.com. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, Mr. Brad, figure, huh?
Mr. Brad Bassi, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your support and your optimism, and looking forward to learning how to rope with you in San Antonio.
Hey, Bryan, thank you. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Appraisal Update podcast. If you didn't get a chance to watch this one, jump over to our YouTube channel. Brad's a great guy. You got to check out his hat, and go ahead and subscribe to our channel while you're there. That's how you will continue to be in the know. We're winding this year down. I hope that it goes out with a bang. I hope you're ready for 2025. I think it's going to be a great year for appraisers. I'm hoping and praying anyway. Enjoy time and fellowship with your family and friends, and happy appraising.
The Appraisal Update podcast is brought to you by Appraiser eLearning.